You are a con. I'm not gay. Traps are stray. Leave my mentions. You Christ cock. I'll jack off to whatever I want. You just wait till we have an artificial wound. A cup. Maybe then you'll realize memes are worth going to hell. I fight for recording shit on Twitter like anime girls wearing MAGA hats while you sit at your job all day owned by your boss 'cause you're a wage slave.
Music by Xylene Bro. I hope you enjoyed that audio representation of the average hate comment I guess. Yep, keep telling yourself that traps aren't gay, then the next step will be it's white. It's the European way of having sex. This is Common Filth Radio episode 103. Thank you very much for listening. You heard the news, you heard the rumors, and they are all true. White Girls Fuck Dogs bumper stickers on sale now at commonfilthradio.bandcamp.com/merch. In this wonderful, beautiful age of moral inversion, social norms dictate to us that judging depravity, calling attention to depravity, is much, much worse than actually partaking in it. So push the boundaries of good taste with this bumper sticker. You can put it on your car, you can put it on your bike, you can put it on your guitar case, whatever you want to do with it. $3 plus shipping and handling. International shipping is available. So I found this post in a Facebook group I belong to, and no, I don't post in any of these, I just lurk. It says, this is, somebody posted this, so I'm just going to read it. I'm going to start reading it now. It says, this pedophile that sexually harassed/raped 9 teenage boys in Iceland just got out of prison after half of his sentence on parole. The sentence was 9 months. One of the boys has already killed himself, and the man spotted swimming in his old neighborhood. Man, Iceland is so fucking retarded when it comes to this issue. Please chat with me and tell me how enraged this makes you or why it doesn't enrage you. Let's just have a discussion on this, and if anybody can get some coverage out there in the world, I think Iceland would appreciate that, especially the victims and their families. Well, here's my coverage, and I say to hell with your nation, to hell with your fellow countrymen that allowed this to happen. Your criminal justice system, which gave this dude a 9-month hotel stay. I don't think anybody out there is talking about how bad Icelandic prison is. And to hell with your fellow countrymen and women for allowing this to happen, because how could he have access to these boys if not for complete absentee parenting? A complete misplace of trust. You know, you have to have some sort of instinct about you. You need it. You need it to go through life. You need to have that intuition. You need to have that intuition about people. That intuition that says, you know, this person rubs me the wrong way. I'm not quite sure how, but, you know, they're making me feel a certain type of way, and I don't like it. So I'm not going to be around these people. I'm not going to let my family be around this, you know, whoever it may be. And this is a nation of, 350,000 people? I've lived in cities larger than Iceland. So any behavior, any action, any lack of action engaged in by anybody is going to be that much more amplified because of how small the nation is. It does affect you. Don't listen to the white girls that fuck dogs. Ever hear of the double slit experiment? Whatever, look, a certain type of people, I'm not going to tell you who, you could figure this out, have a very hard time acknowledging enemies within. which is why they rationalize the presence of an enemy. And the enemy takes over. You see this happen all throughout the Western diaspora, and nobody notices because, well, they look like me, they talk like me. They might not act like me, but that's an aesthetic choice. And it's aesthetic. It's an aesthetic choice. Whatever. I don't need to hammer on about this. I'm going to read this nice little passage here from a fella named Vince White. VinceWhite.com/artbiog.html. You can read all this yourself. It's a good read. But one part I would like to hone in on here says, one can go on about the scams of modern times, the modern scams of the war on terror, war on drugs, man-made global warming, etc. The list is endless, but I think there are a few scams that really compete with the hoax of modern art because of its longevity. At least with environmental scams, they change over time, and what is one decade's future ice age threat becomes discredited by the future desert of the next. I do believe in one truism, however. Art really does reflect life. The only redeeming feature of the 20th century art scam is its incredible ability to reveal the poverty, the destitution, the decadence, the depravity, the stupidity, the mind slavery, and above all, the impoverished soul of a contemporary, westernized human being. The writing is literally on the wall. It's on the wall of every modern art gallery for those with the ability and or the willingness to look and see it. One of my favorite websites, soiledcinema.com, documents excellently the impoverished, westernized soul. We really need to stop using that. It's a euphemism. We're talking about white people. We are talking about white people. Who are our artistic heroes? Well, one of them, if you go to film school, one of the artists, one of the directors people can't shut the fuck up about is Jean-Luc Godard, who did a movie called Number Two. A film called Number Two. So it's from soiledcinema.com. I'll try to remember to link to these pieces below. It says, I'll begin here. Undoubtedly, if Number Two convinced me of anything, is that Jean-Luc Godard only understands sex in an abstract and intellectual sense, as if he was born without the capacity to get aroused by the smell or curves of a woman, and thus looks at the flesh of the so-called fairer sex with the cold detachment of a space alien. Hence his quite questionable sexual interest in prepubescent children. We'll get to his interest in prepubescent children later. By the way, if you didn't know, he's a Frenchman, and we were all very sad when Paris got blown to bits, when France is the target of Arab aggression. You know, I mean, it's all very sad. We should get very sad. We should all post on social media about how we feel about it, because, you know, we all love to act upon our stupid, lying, confused hearts. While Godard's strange introduction is oftentimes incredibly intolerable, it is nothing compared to the repugnant narrating of an unseen female narrator that follows him, who asks many redundant questions and then sometimes includes equally redundant answers, as indicated by the following innately irritating piece of intellectual masturbation, which I will not read. Skipping ahead here, when the feature presentation finally begins and the viewer no longer has to suffer Godard and the female narrator's pseudo-esoteric ramblings about mostly pointless nonsense that rarely provides insight as to what will follow, the viewer is introduced to a precocious little girl named Vanessa, who asks her more or less completely naked mother Sandrine Battistella, "Will I bleed between my legs when I'm big?" To which she receives an affirmative yes and is told to watch out for boys because they can be hard work. While Sandrine describes boys as hard work, her hubby Pierre Audrey has a lot of trouble just getting a proper hard-on, of course, as the viewer might have predicated. Godard attempts to link Pierre's impotence with capitalist tyranny and poverty, among other asinine absurdities, even though everyone knows the Bertolucci-esque stereotype of peasants making for passionate and virile lovers. Notably, towards the beginning of the film, Pierre pisses in a sink while his hysterically horny wife bitches, "I love your cock, but it's always you who decides. It's hard work." and then tries in vain to get his cock hard by stroking it. In fact, Sandrine is so desperate for dick that she apparently cheats on her husband Pierre, who naturally decides to get revenge, or as he states himself in regards to his wife while sounding rather pathetic, "I wanted to rape her. She let me, so I fucked her in the ass. She started screaming. Afterwards, we realized Vanessa had been watching. Family affairs, I suppose." Now I'm going to stop here. You get the idea of what kind of movie this is. This is a product of a depraved, impoverished mind. And it's not just the writer, the director. Everybody who got paid to be in this movie. Everyone who received a check for appearing in this movie naked and doing obscene garbage. Think of all the actors involved with this production. Think of all the people in their lives who did them wrong, who had absolutely no love for what they brought into this world. Because as we know, we're not following the Western definition of love here, which is just, it's interchangeable with cum. All right, as we've established. You know, we talk about red pill, blue pill, black pill, pill. First of all, quit using a vernacular invented by two trannies. All right, stop that. And you know what? If we're going to keep using that, you've all swallowed the cum pill, as coined by a friend of mine. But all these actors who agreed to play a character where he says that he's going to fuck his wife in the ass. He's going to rape his wife. An actress who agrees to prance about naked in front of children. Think about the children in the movie. Who are their parents? I'm going to keep reading. What is it? What else does it say? It said, yeah, the husband Pierre says, quote, "I wanted to rape her, she let me, so I fucked her in the ass. She started screaming. Afterwards, we realized Vanessa had been watching. Family affairs, I suppose." It just keeps getting worse. Why should I get sad when anything bad happens to French people? Why should I be sad at bad things happening to French people? And this is what French people are. What else does it say? Somewhat curiously, an image of the little girl Vanessa is superimposed over a shot of Pierre sodomizing his wife, thus underscoring Godard's dubious fetish for awkward interfamilial fucking. Needless to say, it is no surprise when Vanessa confesses, quote, "Sometimes I think it's pretty, mommy and daddy. Sometimes I think it's caca," unquote. After all, a child cannot help but think of the perils of poop after seeing their enraged father penetrate their mother's bunghole with a pulsating pecker. Out of everyone in the family, Sandrine, who is always flashing around her tits and dark bushy beaver in front of both of her kids, is easily the most insufferable and just all-around repulsive, which largely has to do with her whimsical bitchiness, lame leftist sloganeering, "Anarchy isn't a bomb, it's justice and freedom," self-absorbed fits of rage, and overall anti-maternal behavior. Indeed, aside from giving her daughter a bath while talking about her vagina and giving her kids a fucked up form of sexual education that involves exposing her aroused genitals, Sandrine does virtually nothing for her children and instead spends most of the time trying in vain to arouse her unsurprisingly impotent husband, who seems to know better than anyone that there is no greater turnoff for a man than a bitchy broad that loves to pontificate about her poop problems. In fact, when Sandrine is not bitching about her lack of cock intake, she's yammering on about the fact that she has not had a proper bowel movement in 2 weeks. French people. I'm going to keep reading because you need to understand. We need to document from every conceivable angle the depravity of the European soul. If my name were Jamal or Shlomo or Jorge or Muhammad, I'd look at this and say, they're an easy target. Why do we need to worry about them? They're more of a danger to themselves and each other than they are to us. And that's it. I have to be associated with this in some roundabout way. I have to be associated with, if certain people have to wear this pan-European thing, where we're all okay with each other and we're all gonna talk about how white we are. You know, specifically, I have to deal with the Anglo side of things. The Anglo side of things, which has turned Christianity into a mockery. The megachurch is an Anglo invention. You think I'm very happy about that? I'm not. Because I belong to it. Like I said, we're more of a threat to ourselves and each other than anybody. And what group do I belong to? Not French specifically, but the point remains. Think anything better is coming out of England? You think anything better is coming out of Germany? Ireland? Spain? The Netherlands? Poland? I guess Poland would be the best one out of those just by default. All the places of my ancestors' birth. The place of my birth, America. You see anything good coming out of here? You don't. So I left off the article here in what is arguably the most overtly tender moment of the entire film. Sandrine calls her kids into her bedroom while she's completely naked with her husband, touches her vagina, and then states while playing with her labia, "See this? They're lips, my sex lips," to which Pierre replies in a fatherly fashion while touching his Peter, "See here, it's a kind of mouth, and with this mouth you kiss your lover's sex lips." After showing off her pussy to her kids, Sandrine states it's called love. Love teaches us to talk. What did I say about the Western definition of love being interchangeable with cum? And Pierre adds, and when it's all over, death put its finger to its lips and tells us to be quiet. Unfortunately, it seems no one has ever told Sandrine to be quiet, as she's always talking, even though she has nothing to really say. You know, how else do we give life? If not sperm plus egg equals baby. And the French call it death. The French call it death. Makes a lot of sense. That sentiment is spread all across the depraved European mind. Whether it's in Europe, whether it's in North America, whether it's in the Southern Hemisphere, everywhere. Because you'll be very hard pressed to find a person whose definition of love doesn't overlap mostly with this definition of love. Here's another good part that reveals the depravity of the European soul. As for Sandrine's thoughts about being a mother, she makes things fairly clear when she states in regard to the birth of her son, quote, "I shitted him out from between my legs, and now everything's blocked. I had to stuff myself, even gladly, but it's too strong. My tissue is torn. I get the feeling that everything I say is shit." In what is arguably the most grueling segment of the entire film, Godard juxtaposes footage of Grandma bathing using a wet rag and a sink with insane feminist, translation anti-female quotes from loathsome female eunuch Germaine Greer, like, quote, "Women do not realize how much men hate them. Punished, punished, punished for being the object of hatred through her orifices, her mouth and cunt. Poor Taralala. Women can never commit sexual crimes even when they are enacted upon the bodies of men. The male perversion of violence is an essential condition of the degradation of women. Women cannot be liberated from their impotence by the gift of a gun, although they are equally capable of firing them as men are. Men are tired of having all the responsibility for sex. It is time they were relieved of it. The vagina must come into its own. It's worth repeating. The female attitude to violence is inseparable from this problem," unquote. Well, look, where does this sentiment come from? Where does this idea that men hate women come from? This perception that some women hold, regarding men hating women, I think comes from whatever their version was back then of these kids who are like, "Traps aren't gay. We need artificial wombs," as the song talked about. People, women included, don't like being treated like shit. They don't like being treated like some disposable unit on a battlefield. This idea doesn't come from those who have loving, caring, healthy relationships with the opposite sex. People who come from homes where as a child they witnessed their mother and father interacting in a positive, healthy way that informed their interactions with the opposite sex. These social bonds, these social cues that are formed and learned at an early age, they are so important, which is why sodomy is the greatest moral hazard of our time. The acceptance, promotion, and proliferation of sodomy destroys social bonds. The sodomite is the antithesis of the family. The family, the home, is where proper, healthy social bonds are formed. The act of the sodomite represents the death of the human species, not just physically, but emotionally, psychologically, and spiritually. The product of the promotion, acceptance, and proliferation of sodomy, just scroll back to the beginning of the episode here. That Icelandic guy raping a bunch of kids and pretty much getting away with it. 9 months hotel stay. So it's not just France, it's not just, the Anglosphere. Iceland too, they're all the way out there. Listen to any episode I've done in the last year. I've documented plenty of examples of what happens. I've documented plenty of examples of what kind of damage the God of the West does. And don't get it twisted. The sodomite is the God of the West. You cannot say one word about them which is critical, which is truthful, without a large number of people becoming very, very angry. Friend of the show, the fellow who runs the Earl of Grey Facebook page, provided an example. He showed the amount of likes his page decreases by when he makes a post critical of sodomites. It's true. Saw a Donald Trump supporter on some Facebook page saying that homophobia is bad for business. We need to get past it. Yes, it is bad for business because most Westerners, most Americans are sodomites. 63% think sodomitic relationships morally valid, morally equal, morally superior. Whatever they view it as just fine. Tell me, what race has ever survived as a healthy unit, a culturally, socially functional unit, accepting sodomy? Look what happened to the Greeks. Is Greece a place you want to live? Not a place I want to live. And the rest of Europe's starting to look just like it. Look, I'm perfectly aware that everybody engages in this depravity, but there's one defining factor. It's only one group of people that promotes sexual depravity as a good thing, as a healthy thing. We use our 105 IQs to rationalize self-destructive behavior. That's what we're really good at. The acceptance of it, the promotion of it, culturally, socially, financially. We talked about Barack Hussein Obama's campaign to introduce gay rights to Mother Africa. We know that Barack Hussein Obama, Barry Soetoro, the long-legged Mac Daddy, is half African, full-blooded African on his daddy's side. He's some kind of Euromutt on the other side, but we know that there's some Irish in there. Ireland, his fellow Irishmen, they voted to make sodomitic marriage the law of the land by a margin of about 62 to 63%. That is a very small number of people who recognize sodomy for the moral hazard that it is. Very few. So, which side of the genetic spectrum is informing Barack Hussein Obama, the long-legged Mac Daddy's decision? As uncomfortable and horrifying as this article is about this movie, we have to keep reading it. We have to make it real. Once you speak it, once you put it onto some sort of medium that you can copy, it's there. It's known. and more people need to know. There are many things I'd rather be doing right now, to be honest with you. A lot of things. I could be listening to some music I like. I could be talking to my girlfriend. I could be reading the Bible. Lots of things I could be doing right now. Where did we leave off? As subsequent narration indicates, Godard seems to believe that a woman can only be truly happy if she revolts against traditional female norms and traditions, which is somewhat ironic when one considers that Sandrine, a reckless mother and intolerable wife that puts her sexual drive before her own children, seems to be totally miserable. But of course, the viewer is expected to blame her misery on capitalist tyranny and imaginary boogeymen like the patriarchy. Of course, as a sad, impotent cuck that can only get an erection upon feeling enraged that his wanton wifey has cheated on him, Sandrine's husband can hardly be described as a tyrannical patriarch. In fact, Sandrine's family, the grandfather, is even berated by his grandchildren without the children having the slightest fear that they may be punished for their less than respectful indiscretions to their elders. So here's a little bit more about this piece of shit director that will make you wonder, why doesn't ISIS find this guy? Well, I am somewhat hesitant to accuse him of being some sort of proud pedophile based solely off of number 2, the title of the movie that we just read about. I cannot ignore the fact that Godard would continue to demonstrate with subsequent films that he has some of little girl fetish, and that he hardly seems to be ashamed of that fact. Indeed, for one of the episodes of his largely forgettable 12-part TV series, Six Fois Deux, Godard directed a disturbing scene of his companion Anne-Marie Meville's then 10-year-old daughter doing a completely naked ballet routine. Arguably even more disturbing, Godard blackmailed 9-year-old Camille Verlaud to get naked for his TV miniseries, I don't know, some stupid, France Tour Detour Du and whatever, by threatening to stop the shoot if she refused to comply with his serious demand for completely unclad preteen titillation. And this piece of shit is not in jail. He is not removed from society. In fact, the French people pay him to do this. To this day, still alive. Continuing, not surprisingly considering that virtually all of her classmates would see her naked after the miniseries was broadcasted on television. Verlaud was totally traumatized by the self-described hyper-violent experience to the point where she denied even being a part of France Tour Detour Du and for 2 decades. Of course, it would be no surprise that Godard was a comrade of kosher commie Daniel the Red Cohn-Bendit, who is infamous for describing in his book, The Great Bazaar, 1975, year of the book's release, how he engaged in erotic encounters with 5-year-olds while a teacher at a so-called anti-authoritarian kindergarten. Rather disturbingly, Cohn-Bendit's pro-pedo views were not exactly atypical, as it was a common belief among both intellectuals and laymen alike associated with the student movement of 1968 that children should not be forbidden from anything sexual, including child-adult relations. A common belief that continues on to this day, apparently. And more than just French culture. One must also not forget that both Meville and Camille Verlaud's mother gave their full consent to Godard to direct scenes featuring their unclad prepubescent daughters, thus underscoring the warped parenting trends of that time. What, have they changed? Either way, it is unequivocally creepy and alarming when a middle-aged, four-eyed intellectual is so concerned with getting a little girl disrobed that he threatens her in the sort of manipulative manner that one would expect from a craven sexual predator. But then again, Godard does not look like a sort of frog Woody Allen for nothing. While not plagued with child nudity, Every Man for Himself is another example of where Godard exploited a child for sexual reasons. Indeed, apparently Godard developed a strange infatuation with Swiss auteurs Alan Tanner's daughter, Cecile Tanner, and not unlike the stereotypical scheming pedo, attempted to appeal to her by promising to direct a film about her involving her favorite sport of soccer. While Tanner would eventually get to play a soccer girl in Every Man for Himself, Godar's self-described second first film, and unlike number 2, his true comeback flick, when she was 12 years old, she had no idea it would be an incestuous pedophiliac context. In an incestuous pedophiliac context. Indeed, as Richard Brody noted in regard to Tanner's response upon first seeing the film and realizing that Godard had exploited her in a cinematically sexual fashion without her knowledge, when I saw it at the private screening for the crew, I crawled under my seat. I was dying of shame. Of course, considering that Godard is a long celebrated figure among film academics and a good number of respected mainstream film critics, and virtually all of these individuals are staunch leftists, if not downright communists, he obviously gets a pass for his dubious sexual proclivities, just like Allen and Polanski. Woody Allen, Roman Polanski. In fact, Godard's Judaic biographer Brody spends more time in Everything is Cinema, The Working Life of Jean-Luc Godard, complaining about the filmmaker's supposed anti-Semitism than his more overt and well-documented little girl fetish, but I digress. This is the pathology that European culture incubates. And people get mad at me for not expressing sufficient enough sadness. So sad, so sad. Hashtag this, hashtag that. Let's make out with each other in public to protest these attacks. I'll start over. This is the pathology European culture incubates. I'm not going to get sad when someone exacts temporal retribution upon it. Oh, here's another one. I'm going to read a little bit of this, not as much as the previous one. It's from a movie called The Smell of Us, and from the same website. I'll remember to link to it below. It says, if you are an American artiste that has some degenerate sensational garbage you want to peddle and pass off as legitimate art, your best bet is probably to go to France, where artistic alchemy is the norm, and worthless shit is oftentimes highly revered as provocative cutting-edge art. Indeed, from the film critics turned filmmakers of the Cahiers du Cinema like Jean-Luc Godard and Francois Truffaut that reevaluated Hollywood trash and declared it high cinematic art of the auteur-oriented sort to the frog love of obscenely obnoxious American kosher comedian Jerry Lewis, who some regard as akin to Godard, the French have a curious appreciation for lowbrow yank trash that even most cultivated Americans do not even seem to understand, as if they are attempting to rationalize the fact that they have been culturally colonized by an inferior anti-culture. An inferior mongrel anti-culture. Well, look at what the culture was producing before the cultural colonization. Glorified child porn films. Oh man. And also, if it's an anti-culture, you'd think that it would cure whatever it is that's wrong with them. It doesn't. It just adds on to the shit they produce themselves. So they to themselves are an anti-culture. Or it's not. I don't know. The definition of that's not clear to me. But regardless, it is soulless scumfuck trash. Whatever you want to call it. Culture, anti-culture, American, French. It all applies. Needless to say, I thought it was a match made in heaven or hell when I discovered that debauched American photographer turned cinematic auteur Larry Clark of Kids and What's Up Rockers directed his most recent film in France for a French production company using a seemingly completely French cast and crew. Incidentally, his previous and most pornographic flick, Ken Park 2002, released in 2002, was written by Harmony Korine and co-directed by cinematographer Edward Lockman, and was a American-French-Dutch co-production. Of course, considering that France is currently at the forefront of producing pornographic art house films, with oftentimes unsimulated sex as reflected by cinematic works by a bunch of directors that I'm not going to bother reading off, there's no question that Clark picked the perfect place to make a film featuring incessant sleazy sex scenes, featuring scrawny and oftentimes racially ambiguous teenage skater boys that seem just as excited about trying out a new dick as they do a new skateboard deck. In fact, not only is The Smell of Us, released in 2014, the director's last film since his somewhat mediocre racially charged mestizo twinkfest Marfa Girl, arguably Clark's most decidedly debasing and just all-around sexually deranged film to date, But it is indubitably his most flagrantly faggy, as if the auteurs felt he could only get away with achieving his dream of making a full homo flick if he created it in France. It's probably true. If his trademark motif of shirtless armpit scratching and ball grabbing skater boys in his previous films was not evidence enough of Clark's affinity for fresh young cock, the filmmaker's latest film unequivocally demonstrates that he is hot for sweaty skater twink twat. What a disgusting piece of shit that we enable. That we're like, yeah, do it. We're gonna pay you to do stuff for us. Just build a wall. Stop immigration. Pieces of shit like this will stop existing. No, that'll fix everything, right? No, we're not just going to rationalize this as a good thing. We're not going to rationalize the Larry Clarks of the world. Is that his name? I forgot his name already. Yeah, Larry Clark. We're going to rationalize the Larry Clarks of the world as good for our culture, good for our cause if they have the same political rhetoric as us. He's useful for our cause. Notice it's always useful and useless with white people when describing some abstract ideal that we consider higher than ourselves, even though it's of our own creation, so it can't possibly be. As if I would have any interest in being useful to a group of people that invite depraved retards akin to a Larry Clark, just because they're white and they have similar political rhetoric. Pieces of scum, fuck, filth. Continuing with this article here, while somewhat aimless and devoid of a storyline like most of Clark's films, the film's most prominent subplot involves a doomed love affair between an emotionally detached and exceedingly epicene skater boy with serious mommy issues and his gawky quadroon-like comrade, who is emotionally tortured by the fact that his best friend sells his bunghole to dirty old men but refuses to be his lover or even have sex with him. Part skater, crypto porno, and part hysterical homo romantic tragedy, The Smell of Us, for better or for worse, is a sort of joyously debasing and rudely in-your-face art porn train wreck film that only a dirty old man like Clark could have assembled. So here's where the article, this is what I took away most from it, and I'm going to skip to the parts that talk about this. Notably, French right-wing theorist Guillaume Fay, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, and I don't give a shit. You can correct me if you want, but it's not really a concern right now. A controversial, politically incorrect thinker who, as a man that briefly worked in the porn industry, can hardly be described as a prude, describes in his book, Sex and Deviance, how he believes that his forsaken nation and its media are plagued by what he describes as general sexual obsession. Seems to be a common malady that befalls most dying people. Walking Dead, zombie race. Undoubtedly, a superlatively sick sort of general sexual obsession certainly plagues the fiercely fucked frog purgatory of Clark's film, where a group of teenage skaters become collectively involved in both straight and gay for pay prostitution after two of their friends happen upon an escort website while watching internet porn. Featuring an extremely pedomorphic male quasi-lead who is so irreparably psychologically damaged that, despite being more or less a child, is incapable of initiating a real emotional relationship with the best friend he loves, despite the fact that he allows dirty old men to brutally sodomize him for quick cash. The Smell of Us, an unwaveringly sleazy piece of fairly literally titled cinema that is unmistakably a Clark product, is arguably the director's darkest and most disturbing and damning film, yet as the sort of film that John Wayne Gacy would have loved to stroke his wrinkly old chode to. Indeed, while there might be no mention of a teenage AIDS epidemic like in Kids, or a brutal drug-addled orgy of brain-dead murder and mayhem like in Bully, the forsaken post-Reichian Parisian youth of Clark's latest film have not even the slightest chance of hope or redemption, and the worst part is that they do not even seem to realize it, as they are too concerned with ordering the latest new skate deck or surfing porn sites to ever consider that there might be more to life than skating and fucking. Skipping ahead here, featuring boys rubbing their sweaty balls with their hands and wiping them across their friend's face, a young skater selling a used cum-filled condom to a bearded old bear, a girl pissing in a bucket in public as urine drips off her meaty labia. What the fuck is wrong with you people? Again, director, writer. People who come up with this shit in their mind's eye. And the actors who willingly engage in their vision. An elderly pervert sucking the toes of a teenage boy and then using said toes to violently fuck his own nostrils with glee. A boy licking his computer screen as he watches another boy masturbate on webcam, and various other largely ugly and fetishistic displays of aberrant sexual dysfunction that probably give perennially lascivious Larry Clark a giant Viagra-induced hard on. The smell of us is ultimately unwittingly reveals a number of obvious reasons as to why Muslims hate France and why the French have become so pathetically passive, inept, and otherwise incapacitated when it comes to fighting the Islamic terrorists that freely lurk around the no-go zone areas of Paris. What, you people who cling to, people who are like, you could pry my cummings from my cold dead hands. They're completely uninterested in maintaining their heritage. That's really surprising. Indeed, if Clark's film has anything to do with reality when it comes to French society, and especially French youth, one can only assume that Frogland is on the brink of both a racial and sexual apocalypse that is only being sped up by primitive jihadist degenerates that should not be anywhere near the country in the first place. Well, the barbarians at the gates will put these people out of their misery. I mean, that's what they're doing. You can't describe the soul of people like this as being happy. You couldn't. There's no way these people lead happy, fulfilling lives. The barbarians at the gates, it's a mercy killing. So here's a part of the article that stood out to me the most. It says, like with many of his films, Clark attempts to spread the patently absurd idea in The Smell of Us that all males are bisexual and that every man has an inner faggot. But as Guillaume Fay noted in his book Sex and Deviance regarding the sick and outrageously libelous propagandistic lie and its relation to other big leftist lies, he says, one of the basic ideas of the whole homosexual lobby and homophile ideology is that everybody is bisexual by birth and that homosexuality is a lifestyle choice like any other, purely cultural and not indicative of any inherent difference. This idea is not merely false but pernicious. Such a mental perversion is a symptom of the most extreme development of egalitarian dogma, that is to say, the negation of natural differences between humans. Not only do races not exist, but taking things to their logical conclusion, neither do the sexes or sexual attraction. It is the androgynous reign of homogeneity and undifferentiated uniformity. Those who stir up these hallucinations do not believe them for a second, but it is of the very character of totalitarian language to not believe what one says, or to believe not to believe what one says. Of course, what makes Clark's different from the Hollywood and mainstream media homophile propagandists is that he seems to actually genuinely believe that all people are sexually malleable and that every teenage boy dreams of being buggered by their best friend, or so one would assume after watching his fiercely foul-smelling yet nonetheless fairly entertaining frog skater flick. I don't understand how you find this entertaining. I question your sanity, writer. But it says, while Clark has children, one might naturally assume he was a flaming faggot simply by watching his films. Oh, great. So he spreads not only his sodomite disease through art, what passes as art these days, he does it through his bloodline. Great. And I'm supposed to shed tears and post angry stuff about Muslims on Twitter when Muslims do bad stuff to Western nations. But that Guillaume Fay guy, he says it's especially when one considers Fay's remark. He says, heterosexuals do not put their own sexuality at the center of their personality or their works. Homosexuals do. It is the very definition of obsession. One is a homosexual before one is oneself. The homosexual sexuality governs him precisely because it is pathological and non-reproductive. The only thing I disagree with out of all that is that this is born of egalitarianism. Egalitarianism is a heresy in its own respect, but I think it has very little to do with aberrant sexual behavior. Because as queer right-wing writer, I know that's becoming very redundant now, Queer right-wing writer James J. O'Mara stated in his blogger profile, homosexuals are a natural elite. The only positive thing you can say about that statement, other than its HIV status, is that it's honest. We know where we stand. People who do not engage in deviance, people who stay on the straight and narrow, people who maintain tradition. If only every sodomite revealed their true form. If only every sodomite revealed just how much they hate those who aren't deviants. Well, they do. Over the long term, they do. And it is very well documented when they do. But we refuse to acknowledge it in its proper context. That these people are at war, they have been since the very beginning against the decent, the righteous. What our culture calls homophobia is a very justified response to what the sodomite does. Example, beginning of the show. They harm kids. They bully business owners. Bake the cake, bigot. They go out of their way to harass people who simply tell the truth about what they do. You would think that truth is the antidote. They think it's the antidote, which is why they work so hard at suppressing the truth about them. But what they don't understand is that nobody cares. Because everybody's already on their side. With that being said, here's a nice story from Breitbart.com. Exclusive, London's LGBT police are harassing non-politically correct Twitter users, naming family members in tweets. London has the Metropolitan Police LGBT network, Police with Pride. So they get their own special protection unit. Very nice. A politically incorrect Twitter user has been harassed and by an official London police account, which alleges he stalked his social media presence and/or scoured police databases to identify his family members by name and threaten them on the social media site. The police account claimed to focus on hate crime and responding to trollers, and publicly labeled the user a racist and homophobe. The user said he felt intimidated and is demanding an apology, insisting he has been slurred by the police, who they say they take concerns such as this seriously. The incident began when Paul Perrin, a former IT consultant and founder of RadioFreeUK.org, tweeted out a Daily Mail article focusing on the sexuality of two athletes. Is the whole of Team GB gay/or ethnic? Asked Mr. Perrin, who told Breitbart London that the tweet was merely a comment on gay being included in the media at every opportunity. A fair inquiry, I think. UK police consider anything that is perceived as offensive as a possible hate crime. And London's Metro Police announced plans just last week to spend millions of pounds on a new online hate crime hub to target trolls who offend communities on the internet. And does anybody speak up about this? Does anybody say, hey, this is a misuse and abuse of police resources? No. Nobody says anything. However, instead of attempting to charge Mr. Perrin with any perceivable so-called hate crime, one officer decided to take matters into his own hands and began trolling, insulting, and even threatening a member of the public. The Twitter account for the MET LGBT network, which the force confirmed with Breitbart London, is a recognized staff association account for Met employees. Picked up on Mr. Perrin's tweet, quoting it and accusing him vaguely of an undercurrent of homophobia, racism, and just general nastiness. Oi, bruv, that's not banter, mate. You gotta go to jail now. The network was launched in June of this year at London's Gay Pride celebrations and is described in a statement as the Met's newest staff support association representing LGBT officers and staff. Their Twitter account encourages people to report so-called hate crimes if they are offended by anything. It runs provocative online polls and indulges in other online activist work. They said, we're a staff support association within Met Police UK, but we also focus on hate crime and responding to trollers. Fuck this place. Startled Mr. It says, we're very welcoming of straight people. My mom is straight and she loves gay people. Hashtag love wins. Hashtag equality. Hashtag join us. Look, it speaks for itself. The megalomania is undeniable. What's the difference between narcissism and megalomania? Is there a difference? You know, I'm not too well versed on psychology, but this fits. And this is why most people are homophiles. This is why 63% of people in the West are homophiles. Because they're narcissists who think they're stars of their own reality TV shows. And they think this is because they have a social media presence. You know, everybody gets their Facebook posts liked. Look, I was here. Look, here's a picture of me being here. Like it. Look at how exciting my life is. Like it. Mr. Perrin responded angrily before things took a dark turn. Delighted you've taken an interest in us. Us being the Met LGBT network. We'll take an interest in too. Open source is a goldmine. Give my love to a named member of his family. Redacted, wrote the officer. Someone naming a member of my family is an early warning sign that it is a genuine nutter tweeting me, Mr. Perrin told Breitbart London in a statement. Oh, of course it's a nut job. It's either a woman who looks at another woman, no, I shouldn't even call him that, it's far too dignified a term, a female who looks at another female and thinks like she wants to consume her vaginal secretions. If it's a male, his default state is looking at another male and thinking to himself that he wants to drink that guy's semen. These are not default modes of thought. These thoughts require a very, very, very dysfunctional person to make them. So of course you're dealing with a nut job. Of course you're dealing with a nut job. They all are. It's just a matter of how well they conceal it from everybody else. Continuing, as this person is a police officer, I am sure he has plenty of additional tools to dig for information on me. This is surely what he was implying in his tweet, he said. Mr. Perrin then filed a complaint with the Met's Police Professional Standards Service, and then that complaint will be turned on him because that complaint is homophobic in nature. I wouldn't be surprised if this happened. When he didn't receive a response and discovered the trolling police account had blocked him, he filed a criminal complaint with his local force about the malicious communication. A spokesman for the Met's press office told Breitbart London, "We have received a complaint regarding activity on one of our staff's association's Twitter accounts and are investigating this matter. We expect the highest standards from our officers when interacting with the public, and we take concerns such as this seriously." No, you don't. Mr. Perrin has now received a response but is not satisfied. The police naming me an identifiable individual using a perfectly legal tweet and branding me racist, homophobic, and nasty is out of order and disgusted me, he said, adding, "It is a slur, and if the police are significantly slurring me, it needs to be fixed. An anonymous troll, I can just block and ignore." He also insisted that he didn't believe that, quote, believe I have ever said anything against homosexuality. What adults do in private is their business, unquote. Look, the British people have been so browbeaten into accepting this depravity, but really they brought it upon themselves, browbeating or not. They refuse to stand up for themselves. Look at them. Oh, what adults do in private is their business, except for it's not private. They're publicly saying what they are. It's not private anymore. And it never will be private. We've tried the whole just keep it away from us. We don't care. We've tried that. It doesn't work. The pattern of behavior in these people has long been established. And it takes some especially willful ignorance to not see it. The sodomite wanders from place to place, actively seeking out those who are not paying sufficient enough tribute to them and cause trouble for those they find. That's what they do. That's what they've always done. And we allow it. Because our mantra is, you can pry my cummies from my cold dead hands. An identical motto to that of the sodomite. And now we know why 63% of people either engage in this themselves or sympathize with it. They find something in common with these troublemakers, these perpetual troublemakers. From France to England and now to America, specifically New York State. The New York State Division, this is from LifeSite News, the New York State Division of Human Rights has ruled that the Roman Catholic owners of an Albany area farm violated the civil rights of a lesbian couple when they declined to host the couple's same-sex marriage ceremony in 2012. Again, wandering from place to place, seeking out those who do not pay sufficient enough tribute to their defining feature. It's not enough that these deviants have full institutional support. No, that's not enough at all. They have to cause trouble, undue financial strain for people who own a farm. A farm! What are they doing?
These cisheads exist. They must pay. We're lesbians. We're better than you.
What else is there to say? New York State Division of Human Rights. And they have the authority to take $13,000 from a couple of farmers. For what? Oh, here we go. Robert and Cynthia Gifford, who own and operate Liberty Ridge Farm in, I don't know how that... Shattuck? Is that it? Were ordered by DHR Judge Migdalia Perez and Commissioner Helen Diane Foster to pay $10,000 in fines to the state and an additional $3,000 in damages to the lesbian couple Jenny McCarthy and Melissa Irwin for mental pain and suffering. Additionally, the Giffords must provide sensitivity training to their staff and prominently display a poster highlighting state anti-discrimination laws. Assimilate or die, everybody. E. Michael Jones called America a gay disco, a big gay disco. When you sign up for the military, that's what you're defining. You're not fighting for God and country, you're fighting for Pulse nightclub. The whole Western diaspora is a big gay disco. And our eternal colonial spirit, which is disturbingly similar to the Sodomites' spirit, and how we go from place to place, causing trouble where there's none to be had. That eternal colonial spirit will not stop until the entire world is one big gay disco. Among many other things, but mostly a gay disco. Big gay disco. Oh, what's this? I quit my job to breastfeed my boyfriend every 2 hours from the New York Post. Great! A mom is breastfeeding her boyfriend 20 years after having children. Jennifer Mulford took time. Okay, first of all, why would you agree to have this written about you? You know, they have to make phone calls and say, hey, I heard about this. Can we do a story about you? And they have to say, yeah, well, we want attention. Jennifer Mulford took time off from her job as a bartender to induce breastfeeding because she wants to start an adult breastfeeding relationship with Brad Leeson. Because she has not given birth to a baby recently, she and Brad, 36, need to dry feed every 2 hours to fool her body into thinking she is feeding a child. So she starts producing milk. I'm just going to let you listen to the sirens that I just heard, that my microphone's not picking up. There are no words. So why don't we read this instead? This is an email that I received last month, and I have not done emails in a while just because by the time I'm done with Reddit questions and comments, I'm out of time. So I found this, this was sent to me last month. Sorry for taking so long to get to this. It says, Sir, I am the individual who compiled the Common Filth collection. I have been on vacation and listened to a large swath of the shows. If you could please relay this message on one of your upcoming shows. I've heard so many young people on your show struggling and would like to give my own anecdote. A little backstory, I am turning 33 this year. Without divulging too much about myself, I had a unique opportunity to move to Europe in 2002, which I did. I have lived here since. It was exciting and I look back on the early times fondly. I understand how youth can feel lost in their late teenage years. It is one of the hardest times to find purpose. I was raised in a very small town. I had a stint in a large metropolis before I moved, but I certainly sowed a lot of wild oats when I moved to Europe. I had a very big fuck you attitude, which took a long time to get over. I achieved career success. I slept with a lot of women. I got addicted to drugs. Even when things were great, I was always self-destructing. There was no real aha moment, not when waking up in jail, not when waking up with broken hands from fighting, not when I am certain I have stained the soul of multiple women, not when having partied so hard I would collapse in the shower the next morning. I have felt some extreme lows that still haunt me. Even through all of this, I still maintained a career and people liked me. I wish someone would have called me out on my shit. I openly defied God. I've read the entire work of Hitchens, the work of Dawkins. I was a militant atheist. I remember one specific incident where I was blackout wasted walking home. An individual saw me and stopped me. He told me he was a reformed homosexual. I drunkenly said statements like, "You can suck cock, it's okay," and other such tripe. He gave me one of those little books that had Bible anecdotes in it, the kind I would see in payphone booths in the 90s. It was a small black and white comic about Jesus. I had no memory of this the next day and found it in my back pocket, where I then embarrassingly remembered our conversation. Point is, things like this happened more often than not. A lot of my friends would say, "I would pray for you." These people genuinely liked me but knew I had issues. There were so many incidents of someone trying to pull me towards God. I rejected all of them. Things will start to make more sense as you get older. Unfortunately, for some, it takes longer than others. For me, I had befriended someone of faith, and I am living through the refugee crisis. This, compounded with faltering on some drug use and finally making a change, helped point me in the right direction. Then I discovered the Common Filth podcast. I must admit it was refreshing for me because I am angry. I am angry at how the world is, how degeneracy almost destroyed my life, how I see people destroying themselves as I almost did. I can easily relate easily to CF's message. I truly believe that God was looking out for me. Even through all of my foibles, I climbed the corporate ladder. I found a good woman. The good people never betrayed me. I've seen others falter and had their lives ruined by doing far less than I did. I am truly blessed. Frankly, I do not deserve it. It is not lost on me that I am taking advice from someone who is younger than me, but I want you young people to know that Common Filth is right about pert near everything. You'll save yourself a lot of heartache if you simply listen to his message, apply that message, and never ignore the tiny voice in your head or heart. Simply listen to that voice. There are stains on my soul I cannot get rid of. Believe me, you do not want this. You and your work are greatly appreciated. Well, thank you, sir, for taking time to share your story, and I apologize that it took me so long to get to, but it's like God speaks to people through circumstance above all else, and I was clicking through my emails, found this, and it stood out to me. I needed to read it. I needed to read it now. You say that your soul is stained, and that's most likely true, but think of it like this. How many people don't have souls? Or if they do, they completely disregard them. They completely disregard them. They inflict pain upon themselves, emotional, psychological, spiritual pain upon themselves, and carry on. And they keep doing it, and they keep doing it, and they keep inflicting this damage upon themselves so much that eventually they become numb to it. Be thankful that you have a soul that can still feel pain. There are millions of people who are living a life that you were living. There are millions of people who are living this life, which is not life at all, and they think it's fine. They think there's nothing wrong with it. r/Common Filth on Reddit, question and comment thread. Let me remember to lock it this time so nobody submits questions while I'm recording. Assuming you've watched it, what's your favorite $1 Million Extreme World Peace sketch so far? Also, what happened to the music at the end of your videos? Well, it was back on Tumblrista's episode 70, so nothing happened to it. It's just something that I was neglecting for a while on these videos on AFK. But my favorite $1 Million Extreme World Peace sketch was the Wall Show. I think that's what it was called. That was really funny. What's with your Matt Forney connection? If I take his writings and books at face value, he doesn't seem to be someone you would be keen on. The handful of podcasts of his I've heard were better in comparison, but all things considered, along with his internet footprint, I fail to understand. Well, he invited me on his one of his live streams some number of weeks back, and I give back to those who give me an audience I wouldn't normally have. So I give my gratitude despite whatever disagreements I might have with people who do help me out in that respect. Howdy, Mr. Com Juan Filthowitz. Just finished Common Filth Extra episode 31, and your comments about civilization remind me of good old Varg. Remember, angry pagan guy. I couldn't link you to any specific video now, but his message could be broadly described as civilization is destructive to man. The more I listen to you and him, the more I realize that the autistic right wants to preserve something that should just die, Western civilization. I would prefer to die peacefully on its own, not stabbed and raped by the barbarian hordes, but apparently that's the history to be repeated. And even if it survives them this time, it won't survive the cancer and AIDS that's growing within. Just like Schwartzson says in his comment, save yourself and those closest to you, which is, again, something that Varg advocates as well. God bless, hail, Odin. Well, we're not about that here. But, yeah, good comment. Nothing I can add to it. This episode fits quite well within the scope of this comment. And I had not read this comment before I arranged this show for production. Hey, CF, check out this article. Are gays pedophiles? No, here's proof. It's probably too long for you to read in full on the show, but if you have the patience, it's from the Daily Cost. It's probably too long for you to read in full on the show, but if you have the patience, read the first 3 paragraphs. I think it would be important for the newer listeners to see the mental gymnastics that homophiles put themselves through with the assistance of the Brahmins. Experts. Wait, hold on. Somebody just sent this to me. I'm not going to read this. I'm going to read what was sent to me instead, if I can find it in my mentions here. Yeah, that's a good sound that mouse wheel makes, doesn't it? Hold on. Damn, where is it? Here we go. Gay Connecticut couple accused of raping adopted children will face trial. The case of a same-sex Connecticut couple accused of repeatedly raping and abusing 2 of their 9 adopted boys is heading... Wait, hold on here. I'm already... Nobody from whatever government agency is in charge of adoption, whatever intermediary there is in order to legally adopt children, nobody sounds the alarm. These 2 homos are adopting boys exclusively. And nobody looks in a crooked way at that. Nobody tilts their head and says, something's not right about that. Of course not. 63%. 63% of people think this is fine. And the remaining 37% who understand what this is all about, truly. And it's not really that much, because I think some people within that number are just operating on instinct, and they have good instincts, but they can't quite articulate what is wrong with this. But however they feel about it, whether they can articulate what's wrong with it or not, the 37%, we don't have any power. We don't have any power to stop this. The 37% of us who recognize this for what it is, we're either retired, too old to do anything about it. We're not legislators. We don't work in City Hall. We don't work in Congress. We don't work in Senate. At the national or state level, none of us. And none of us can ever get there because, 63%. It's interesting, an argument that the autistic right likes to make is that conservatives are stupid. They never win because they base their votes off of stupid stuff like gay marriage, yet they don't call out leftists, liberals, for doing the same thing. The liberal vote hinges upon something far more destructive, which is this: gay rights. the rights of pedophiles, pederasts, to adopt children. And someone points out one of the arguments in the Daily Kos article about gays not being pedophiles. Someone points out that the article says sexual violence and abuse is about power, domination, and control. It's not about sexual attraction. Okay, if it's just about sexual attraction and it knows no gender, they wouldn't exclusively adopt boys. It just wouldn't happen if it was just about power. And I find that argument really funny in light of what happened at Penn State with Jerry Sandusky, defensive coordinator for an elite college football program of its time. That's plenty powerful to me. That's plenty of power process being satisfied from my vantage point. But apparently Jerry Sandusky thought otherwise. Oh wait, it's all about power and domination and control, except for the part where he comes in little boys' mouths. Yeah, that's about power, domination, and control, despite the fact that he has a high-paying, high-status job. Give me a break. Don't lie to me. And then the response you received to this comment here, it says, I always hear this meme, but I don't believe it. Obviously, there's a sexualization of power and control. Not all abusers are psychopaths who are non-sexually sadistic. I think it would be most commonly just be very selfish, impulsive people taking advantage of someone under their control to fulfill their sexual frustration. Is there a political aspect underlying this denial of the sexual origin of sexual abuse? Well, of course it is. Among the autistic right and the left, they all have their pet homosexuals, and they refuse to acknowledge them for what they really are, in spite of overwhelming evidence to the contrary. Their thought leaders, they say that this has been a part of European culture forever. It's nothing to get worked up about. That's what they say, not me. Their words, not mine. This is not some straw man. This is what they say. To my dearest CF, I write to you in times of great moral peril. Tomorrow is Daffodil Day here in Australia. It's one of the few times our nation bands together to achieve something even mildly positive. Fundraising for cancer research. Basically, people buy daffodils and wear yellow to work tomorrow, and workplaces collect small donations from willing participants. Well, I'm sure these not-for-profits employ a great many golden retriever social media marketing consultants and waste untold sums of money. Even the most jaded, cynical part of me finds it difficult to take issue with this event and its ultimate goals. Surely only a tiny proportion of the most reprehensible elements of society would deign to ruin such an event. Who on God's green earth would want to put a spanner in the works on this day? Sniff, sniff, is that? Well, it sure smells like current year around here, doesn't it? You guessed it, guys, our natural aristocracy is here to piss in your ear once again. At my workplace tomorrow, it isn't Daffodil Day, it's Wear It Purple Day. Our glorious corporate overlords have instructed us to wear purple and donate to a charity that specifically targets underage kids with their propaganda about gay-related immune deficiency being a breeder conspiracy and gender being a social construct no matter what your stupid parents say. Embrace your curiosity, child. Explore your sexuality. Age is just a social construct, no pedo. Who would have thunk it? Society at large now values people who commit buggery in public toilets over cancer patients. And there is as much as we like to deny, there is a racial component to that arrangement of priority. They are openly admitting it by using what may be the only day of the year everyone is conditioned into handing over a few dollary dues to charity to fund their peddling of smut to children rather than cancer research. Hey, breeder, here's a hot tip. If you get grid, you likely won't live long enough to get cancer, so funding research for it is basically a waste of time. That is probably the reasoning behind it. I've been inundated by emails about this all week. Usually we have a charity casual day every month or so. No one takes any notice. And they're typically charities for cancer patients, terminally ill kids, animal welfare, the standard charities. But as soon as our natural aristocracy decides indoctrinating children into the pause cult is a good idea, we're bombarded with this bullshit starting about a month ago. Seriously, the charity is called -18. Look it up, I dare you. May as well call it NAMBLA or drop the pretense altogether and admit they'd like to fuck children. In other words, do you remember Truvada and the whores that endorse it, Common Filth? Well, Australia recently knocked back a proposal to put it on our pharmaceutical benefit scheme. Naturally, the aristocrats are furious, desperately citing statistics that in areas it was distributed, new HIV cases dropped by 30%. They seem to think that this proves that this anti-grid medication should be subsidized by the taxpayer. It proves quite the opposite. The mind of the reprobate is so warped and devoid of sense that they cannot reduce their exposure to HIV by cutting out contact with boy pussy and toxic cock. It actually takes medical intervention of the highest order, daily medication, to help them avoid the Lord's curse upon them. Very few people got grid from a bad blood transfusion or by stepping on a needle at the beach. Well, yeah, because their disease doesn't survive very long outside the host. That just doesn't happen very often. Very few people actually got grid. Yeah, I already read that. Most grid patients are garden variety sodomite and junkie scum. Though after we give them the right to marry, I'm sure it'll go on the PBS right next to another society-ruining pill that whores take once a day. Fuck, what's the point anymore? Maybe I'll donate my paycheck to their pedophilic charity tomorrow and become king of the fags. Pause you later, CF. Just another day in the Anglosphere, where all our meta-political movements that apparently represent the last hope for Western civilization hinges upon these people who love their people so much. I need a drink of water. No, those are my Truvada pills because, you know, I'm a closeted homosexual according to some people. That's what they think. That's what they say about me because it makes sense. I got a comment one time that said like, "Oh, you're just like you just do this show because you got converted by some Bible thumpers, and now that's what makes sense." Which goes to show you how recently converted most of the autistic right is, that they're using 10-year-old left-wing arguments against those who actually make a case against sodomy. They really are the stuff white people like of 8 years ago, complete with their own brand of wrong white people. I mean, their political rhetoric is precisely the same. They fetishize socialist Europe, despite the horrors that socialism has created for Europe. It's insane. They are precisely the same thing as stuff white people like. That website, that blog, which I think is the most important document of our time. It's just like the people who call other people swivels. They don't understand how accurately it applies to them. Yeah, that's what they are. That's what the autistic right really is. That is what esoteric Trumpism is. It's just stuff white people like from 8 years ago. But this comment from Australia, or Australia as you put it, these are my favorite comments because they're from the front lines. I really enjoy comments that take what I say and apply it to what's going on in their life. You know, they're viewing it through this lens that that really all of us should be viewing it through, but we're too stupid to do that. Comments like yours, stories like yours, prove that these sicknesses, these pathologies, do not exist simply on the fringes of society. They're mainstream. Next, your comment on being a culture of ironic masturbation. I'm masturbating, ironically. No, chronic masturbation. Your comment on being a culture of chronic masturbation made me remember something that the blogger Antidem had written a while ago. In All of Things, the deconstruction of a ridiculous transhumanist pony fanfiction. He's kind of a spurg, but he's smart and tends to criticize the right things. Well, I wouldn't say that. I think Antidem's really smart. I like Antidem a lot. He's one of the earliest promoters of my work, so very thankful for that. But, so I disagree that he's a spurg. I do. In short, this is what he broke it down to. It's worth reading the whole post if you can stomach the subject matter. Masturbation can be defined as any activity that short circuits our internal reward mechanisms by stimulating and gaining the reward for a productive behavior without actually doing anything productive. The time, effort, and resources put into that stimulation by any measure other than simply delivering pleasure have been wasted. Just wanted to share that, and that's a quote from Antidem. You can find that at antidem.wordpress.com. Another thing that got me thinking was what a poster was discussing in the recent poll threads about you. The long and the short of what the guy was saying was this: Western civilization is the white race, what have you, is irreversibly doomed and can't be saved. However, though, one can save himself and those close to him in order to start building something up again, rather than trying to douse an inferno with a watering can. I took some screen caps because I really liked what he was saying. What was he saying? Movements are for fags. Oh, it loads and then it reloads. What's the point of that? Okay, never mind. Yeah, it's like I see the whole images and then it's like deloaded. If that's a thing. Movements are for fags. Just be a functioning human being in your sphere of influence and start doing something that will actually help those close to you. You're trying to save a ship with every compartment flooded. By all means, find a wife, have children, be a good father. Don't do it out of some misguided notion that you have a duty to the people that betrayed you. Do it because it is what men are meant to do. CF doesn't, but Manning does, and CF generally likes Pastor Manning because he has no bullshit on sodomy. CF has discussed Tel Aviv being the gay capital of the Middle East in passing. Yeah, and that's what we want to emulate. It's like you're like, Jews made us be gay. No, you made you be gay. You're just emulating them. You have loyalty to this notion of the white race, yes, the same race that has overwhelmingly enabled its own destruction and turned against those that actually care about its health. The NSDAP lost. The Bolsheviks ultimately lost. What is won is just the insidious meme of liberalism. It will continue to do so unless you build something strong enough to resist it. Just trying to make your own never works. You need something new rather than try to fight it within the system. Political clusterfucking will not make anything new, just drain your resources on a shitty battlefield. I'm advocating fucking off from the people who are doing that and starting fresh, unlike you. Insisting that you try to bring back the increasingly weak pulse of this sore-ridden, emaciated, and gangrenous body. God sent the Huns, God sent the Mongols, God sent the plague, God sent Islam. We aren't breeding, we are increasingly killing ourselves due to despondency, and we poison our bodies with medicine and foods that make our lives more convenient. Despair is a sin, yes, but you don't know what that even means. In a Christian context, despair is the belief that one soul cannot attain salvation, and is a denial of the power of God. It has nothing to do with material affairs. In fact, I'd argue that the way some people put their faith in earthly institutions is tantamount to idolatry. Well, this is important to understand because despair in the Christian context, yes, the belief that one soul cannot attain salvation. It's a despair for you. It's a despair for you to think that, I just give up. I'm not going to, be of God. I'm not going to be in his kingdom. My soul is meaningless. Things are meaningless. That is despair. The belief that you are meaningless. However, we see in the Bible that God gives people over to a reprobate mind. God gives up on people. And it is not a sin to acknowledge those God has given up on. After all, he did it. It's not a sin to acknowledge God's work. It is not a sin to acknowledge the decisions God makes. Refuse to do anything to improve the situation. This is another retarded mimetic that is pushed by the autistic right, by the internet right wing. You just don't want to improve Earth. You're not going to improve life on Earth by doing what you think is going to improve it. Man's solutions for man's problems just create more problems. And he says, I already explained what I do. Exit. What you are doing is hanging around a nuclear disaster site trying to find a kitten among sewer rats. The situation is lost. Start creating a new one. And by one, I mean a whole set. One containing many. Take pride in the good, absolutely, but this umbrella white race stuff is garbage. The fact is, nobility is damn near extinguished, and the average white male west of the Oder is a low-T bitch. Just that I don't believe in your false gods doesn't make me a nihilist. I do actually believe in things, just not the things you care about, which is something I've said time and time again. Something I've said on many different occasions. When people love the word nihilist, nihilist, nihilist. It makes them, they think saying it makes it sound smart, yet they don't look up the dictionary definition of the damn word. And the average white male west of the Oder is a low T bitch. Absolutely. And this solipsistic attitude is a product of that low testosterone. You don't believe in what I believe in? What I believe in are the only things that matter. Therefore, you're a nihilist for not believing in it. This is their thought process. It's insane. It's crazy. Yeah, it's like, what are you using your IQ points for? Drugs? Like, oh, this drug has this effect on me. Oh, you can take it. You could take this drug under this threshold of millimeters and you'll still be fine and not overdose. That's what they're using their IQs for. They're not using it for introspection and finding out why they're wrong, why the things they say are wrong. They just say stuff. It's like they're on autopilot. It's very sad. People will follow whatever their perceived peer group does, and idiots that fall for that bullshit should receive no quarter. It's like listening to Tokyo Rose on Okinawa and poisoning your unit. I never advocated for liberalism. I think it is the single most evil thing to have emerged from men's mind in the last 1,000 years. I'm not an individualist. I just don't have any sort of collective, besides my immediate family, that deserves any loyalty. Until I find one, I remain in a small sphere. Perfectly reasonable. I'm looking at the big picture. What happens after the Horde sack Rome rather than put in a futile effort to prevent the well-deserved sacking. Whites need to be decimated in order for us to actually be functional again. I don't understand why this is so controversial. Most of you would be fine with throwing suspected communists into camps, even though the occasional innocent might get caught in the mess. It's the same deal here. The vast majority of Western whites are like communists, but far, far worse, and need to be exterminated. Anything less extreme is not good enough, too late for anything else. The state of whites, generally speaking, is contemptible, far worse than what can be seen in the ascendant cultures of even black Africa. They at least can reasonably claim to be ascending rather than descending. We achieved great things, we were great, now we are not only content to, but insist upon the most depraved forms of self-destruction. You are witnessing the fall of the American empire and don't want to acknowledge it. Instead, you are content to indulge in your bread and circuses with electoral politics. You put your hope in that which deserves none. Put it into something worthwhile or abandon it in whole. Barbarian tribes are already massing at the gates. You can cower as they sack your cities, steal your goods, and defile your women, or you can leave for the countryside to rebuild, to do something of value. The people of the city hate you and wouldn't hesitate to rummage through your house to see what the barbarians left behind. You owe them nothing. They have decided their own fates. And these city-dwelling left-leaning whites that these people want to protect so much, that's just it. They hate you. They hate your guts. You cannot be loyal to that which is not loyal to you. It's suicidal. But a lot of white people want to kill themselves. They even say it themselves. I wish I was dead, but they're too much of a coward to do it themselves. I thought life was meaningless, bro. You have loyalty to this notion of the white race, yes? The same race that has overwhelmingly enabled its own destruction and turned against those that actually care about its health. I already read that. But continuing with the comment, and then those were comments from a screenshot from a poster on an anonymous image board, which you so kindly documented for us. Naturally, he was called a nihilist and accused of despair by people trying to leverage Christianity's tenets against him. He answered with brevity. Yeah, I already read that. Not questioned, but I figured you and your listeners might appreciate those tidbits. Yeah, great insight. And then the response here that says, in his darkest moments, Lovecraft could not have devised anything more existentially horrifying. Nothing else needs to be said. Well, let's see if I agree with nearly everything you have to say, but one thing I simply don't see happening is a certain fringe ideological movement you talk about fading into obscurity anytime soon. They seem to be gaining ground and fast. The real reason behind this isn't actually anything the people who identify with this label do, but the way the left reacts to them. For example, by putting brackets on their Twitter names, like that Birds Though page does, which is a fantastic page. I really like birds now. They're charming creatures. And even to the extent of Hillary Clinton specifically addressing them in speeches. The best way for something to fade away is for it to be ignored. At this point, it is being given far more attention than it deserves and is therefore on the rise rather than decline. Well, look, I'm saying it's going to be absorbed into something else. That's all. I'm not exactly happy about this as much as I care about racial issues. It seems like any and all social issues are left behind by this movement. Well, that's because they are socially maladjusted themselves. They are social and moral liabilities themselves, so they ignore it. They're like, they attach themselves to a movement that won't pass any judgment for their socially maladjusted behavior. And that's all you need to say about it. That's all you need to say about it. There is no hope of reforming it because, as you sow, so shall you reap. You reap a bunch of child homosexual curmudgeons who believe in nothing but the misery of their own that's brought on by the color of their skin. And if you don't believe in that, they think that's nihilism. So no, there is no chance for reform. Because those who are of a mind to reform are greatly outnumbered by those who don't. In a democratic culture, the mob rules. Always has, always will. Don't worry about them. Democracy is structurally and systematically liberal. The best case for them is that Trump gets elected and the Supreme Court and bureaucrats that actually run the country deign to reduce immigration by 10% until he leaves office, at which point every university professor publishes studies about how literally everything he ever did was wrong and elementary schools demonize him. And that's the best case scenario. In the moderate case, they simply ignore him and do what they like anyway, regardless of any laws or executive actions, just like how they ignored parts of the Reagan Amnesty Act they didn't like. The worst case, that's if Trump poses a genuine threat to liberals. I don't really think he does, but let's assume they do. At that point, the esoteric Trumpists, like the Japanese, Germans, and French, will see that the fuckboy new male aesthetic is just a pose for normies. When it's actually threatened, when its back is really to the wall, the left is just as willing to physically remove as they could ever be. Trump and proles will get decolonized so fast you'll think you're on full communism. And that's assuming that they don't rig the vote, which they will. As anyone against gay marriage knows, supposed proponents of democracy are flexible like that. Very true. But above all else, what their chosen candidate in this electoral politics shit show represents is a palliative. Something to keep them comfortable until they die from their terminal spiritual disease. Same thing happened with the under the Bush administration. You think your white American male, your typical white American male, was better under Bush? No. They just used the presidency to convince themselves everything's still fine. America, USA, we're still in charge. As they surround themselves with a cocoon of pornography, booze, and football. And the flunky children those dipshits raised. Substitute Bush for Trump. Substitute pornography for Grindr. Switch out booze for weed. Switch out football for memes. LOCF, could you clarify your position on germ theory in regards to homosexuality? You often reference that homosexuals behave in ways that would be conducive to viruses spreading. I'm curious as to if you are using that as a sort of comparison or if you are alluding to actual flat germ theory. To me, germ theory kind of takes individuals out of the equation when it comes to sodomite behavior, and thus I think it's a dangerous theory to embrace because it detracts, at least in part, from the individual and their responsibility for their actions. It reduces the weight of that terrible sin if it isn't a flat choice of theirs, and their power of free will have been diminished. But I'd be glad to hear any thoughts you may have on this, just one brother in Christ sharing his thoughts with another. Look, when I talk about gay germ theory, I think it's very interesting in that they compare homosexuals to rats infected with toxoplasmosis. Rats infected with toxoplasmosis from cats, where rats become infatuated with cat piss, so that they roll around in it. They seek it out so that cats may more easily eat rats. And it can't be denied that homosexual activity is a total disease vector. Everything they do ensures some sort of damage done to their body. Everything. Everything they do. 100% of their sexual partners they fellate and ingest semen from about half of those. Semen contains virtually every germ carried in the bloodstream, so this is about equivalent to ingesting raw human blood. One study reports 70% of homosexuals admitting to having sex only one time with over 50% of their partners. One study reports that the average homo has between 20 and 106 partners per year. The average heterosexual has 8 partners in their lifetime. Combine that with the fact that HIV transmission through penis and vagina sex, that it happens like 1 in 900 times where HIV is present within one of the parties. So yeah, there you go. Sperm readily penetrates the anal wall, which is only 1 cell thick, and gains direct access to the bloodstream. This causes massive immunological damage to the body's T and B cell defensive systems. 50% of male syphilis is carried by homosexuals, as a rectal infection can enter through the urethra of another homosexual during anal sex. Around 67% to 80% of homosexuals lick and or insert their tongues into the anus of their partners and ingest biologically significant amounts of feces, which is the chief cause of hepatitis and parasitic infections among them. This practice is called the prime taste treat in sex in the bestseller, The Joy of Gay Sex. 33% of homosexuals admit to fisting, urinating on each other, and torture has doubled among homosexuals since the 1940s, and fisting has increased astronomically. 17% of homosexuals eat and or rub the feces of their sex partners on themselves. 12% of homosexuals give/receive enemas as a part of sex. Everything these people do, it promotes the spread of disease. And those are just the physical ones. In one study, the average homosexual filleted somewhere between 20 and 106 men, swallowed 50 seminal discharges, had 72 penile penetrations of the anus, and ingested feces of 23 different men, every year. Many of their sexual encounters occur while drunk, high on drugs, or in an orgy setting. Many homosexuals don't pay heed to warnings of their lifestyles. Knowledge of health guidelines was quite high, but this knowledge had no relation to their sexual behavior. Oh, what? You're telling me that education doesn't fix their pathology? That they're going to do whatever the hell they want? Education. We just need education. That just gives them a point of reference for their rebellion. Oh, they're telling me to do this, I'm going to do the opposite. That's all it is. That's what education really is. It's garbage. Education is a cure for nothing. It just makes white people feel good when they say it because it has more than 2 syllables. Education. Sounds nice and romantic, doesn't it? Whatever. Hey, when we say God's plan, what does this actually refer to in the Bible? I've always been kind of sketchy of this idea, saying it's God's plan for someone even when something horrific happens to them at a young age. This sounds like some sort of atheist post, but I'm really unsure of its origins, and it seems to me a creation of man rather than an interpretation of Scripture. Well, God is sovereign over all. And God is not man. He doesn't think like a man. He doesn't think like humans do. Humans want everything to be like a Disney movie. We do not like discomfort. We don't like feeling even psychological discomfort over the idea that some things need to happen in order for something else to happen from it. We don't like that idea. We just want everybody to be nice and have nice, easy lives. We want to be veal. We want to be soft like veal. It's pathetic. But God is sovereign over all. You can find that in the Bible. Hey, CF, I've heard you mention a few times that you or people like you are hated by gays, and you found yourself pushed into having animosity for homosexuals because of this. Well, I find the way a lot of gays and active in gay culture talk about Christianity and Christians rather disgusting. Shouldn't you consider the fact that many have been mistreated and abused by heterosexual society because of their orientation? Look, I'm not going to lay into you too hard. Are you new here? Are you new here? Have you not listened to any of the things that the stories that I've covered? The stories that I put into context? Not that I've covered them, I just regurgitated them and put them into their proper context. Homosexuals have and always will be the aggressors. Quote-unquote homophobia is a reaction to that. Why do you think they're named after a bundle of sticks? Why? Because individually, oh, they seem nice, they're nice, they help our movement, blah, 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 blah. But together, they're fire starters. They do nothing but to cause trouble. And they are tribal people. They're probably the most tribal people. And when that happens, when they organize on a tribal basis, not by blood or heritage or religion, They organize through
We need to get our cummies.
everywhere they go, they cause trouble for decent people. Everywhere, without exception. We have documented several examples on this very episode of the show, not to mention every other episode of the show I've done. I don't merely mean condemnation of gay sex, but shit like gay bashings, being beaten in school, called faggots, and so on. Oh, boo-hoo. I got called a faggot, therefore I'm gonna go slam meth and go get fisted by a stranger. That's not how normal people think. You get called a name, you think like, well, that guy's a jerk, whatever, move on. Boo-hoo, I have a bad relationship with my parents, therefore I'm a meth addict. That doesn't work. I've known people with bad relationships with their parents. Guess what they do? They either work it out or move on with their lives. And gay bashing, let me guess, poor Matthew Shepard, am I right? He was a piece of shit junkie who got fucked up by other piece of shit junkies. But he was gay. He was a secular saint because of his gayness. That's what we think. That's why we ignore all the other illicit shit he was involved with. You mentioned Gore Vidal's notorious Ben-Hur screenplay and the way Charlton Heston was deceived in the last episode as some kind of impetus for you not to care about the homosexuals killed in Orlando. And I would say many homosexual supremacists follow the same line of thinking stemming from the way they were treated. They were treated bad. Are you shitting me? They're still alive. How bad could they have possibly been treated? You think the Gore Vidal's Ben-Hur screenplay is the only reason why? Blah, 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 you say. I'm not trying to reinforce the victimization narrative out of some kind of social justice obligation, but I think your reaction of pure hatred is unfair and uncontextualized. Bullshit. I contextualize it every week. It's not my fault you don't listen. Of course, you see a society that is homophile, but it was preceded by one that was, for better or worse, homophobic. Lurk more. Hail, pause, CF. I forgot to mention during my visit around Hollywood, there was the only church I saw. It was the Hollywood United Methodist Church. Since I don't concern myself with the worries of our natural aristocracy, I didn't know what the large red ribbon on the side of the tower meant. In reality, this church attempts to display solidarity with dying sodomites. The tagline to their website is inclusive Christianity. They obviously don't have any decent person in mind. At Hollywood Methodist Church, we believe that God is love. Oh, it's the Western definition of love. It's the white people definition of love, not the biblical one. That all people are welcome and equal in the family of God, and that God is for us and not against us. I see one church Varga Vicarness might want to look into. Is that how you say it? I don't care. But yeah, this is when everybody says white people made Christianity what it is, I point to this. You've made it into a pro-sodomite secular temple. That's what white people have done with the church. We should have never introduced Christianity to Anglo-Saxons, because Anglo-Saxons are the most soulless, materialistic people on the planet. They've turned Christianity into a business, just like they turn everything into a business. The megachurch, the toothless, soulless, lying megachurch, the likes of which Joel Osteen, sodomites like Joel Osteen occupy, is a white Anglo invention. Spiritual, not religious. And they sell books to retards. And they make a lot of money doing it. Hello, CF. I may have the opportunity to work in a facility services supportive role for a local church. This church is a charismatic church that declares it to be, among other things, religion-free. Has a graphic of a crossed-out Bible on their website. I guess they mean they don't entirely adhere to follow the Bible's teachings. What do? Run away? I mean, if you're getting paid, just take their money and do the least amount of work possible. And, yeah, I mean, that's what I would suggest doing. I mean, if you need the money, if you need to work, just do it to take their money. Don't think that you're doing anything good. Actually, you will be doing good by draining them of some sort of resource. But, you know, if the money doesn't mean that much to you, avoid it altogether. WebMD, pretend mommy program doesn't deter teen pregnancy. Yeah, nothing does, because the heart wants what the heart wants, and the heart is wrong. Think like, oh, I just want to... You see, here's the reason why they're able to get away with sex education in Europe and have low teen pregnancy rates. It's because young European boys are completely uninterested in the opposite sex. That's just the fact of the matter. So, but we need more education. It'll fix things. Hey, see, I'm back again with a quick question. First off, I enlisted in the Navy back in May, but I've been waiting to ship out since I'm on delayed entry due to the nature of my job/rate. I know you've spoken about your feelings on the current state of affairs in the armed forces, but I feel as though it's one of the few legitimate alternatives to college nowadays. Granted, that's assuming you get a job you can actually apply to the civilian market, but that's kind of another story. I 100% agree with you that academia is corrupt and doesn't deserve a single shekel from my ever-shrinking millennial wallet, which is why I resolved to go with the military or a trade. Would you consider it a viable alternative to college, as long as you go in knowing there are posites at work in certain sectors? Well, it's the entire thing. And like I said with the previous question, not the WebMD link, but look, if you're going into it just looking for a job, looking to take money from these people, fine. Do it. I mean, you're right. There are very few alternatives to college. Trade school's one of them. That's something I recommend a lot. And a lot of people have written into me saying that, you know, they got good paying jobs as skilled laborers. So, like in plumbing, welding, what have you. I'm not telling anybody to join the military, like go out of their way and serve your country, serve the big gay disco. I'm not going to explicitly recommend that, but you know, if they're going to pay you, take their money. Drain every resource you possibly can from the big gay disco defense force. Hey, CF newcomer here. I was listening to your podcast, episode 99, at about hour 43. You said you don't support spanking, which has led me to ask, what do you think of Proverbs 13:24? And God bless. For our listeners, I will read Proverbs 13:24 from English Standard Version. Whoever spares the rod hates his son, but he who loves him is diligent to discipline him. There's your biblical definition of love, setting him upon the right path. It's like this. A parent who just lets their kid run buck wild, staying up late, eating junk food, completely undisciplined, that's hatred. That is the worst form of hatred. If you love your child, you give your child structure. You tell them you're free to do this, but here's the limit. You're screwing up. I'm going to reprimand you for it. That's love. And spanking, you know, I think that's just for most parents, that's just like the vast majority of them, 9 out of 10, 99 out of 100. For them, it's just a form of, it's venting, basically. They're taking their frustrations at life out on their children, and it's usually completely unjustified. It's not a form of discipline. Hey, CF, I wanted to elaborate a bit on a topic you briefly covered in episode 102, namely the practice of censoring degenerate media. Look, I get you that you libertarian types are getting real pumped over most free speech lately, and I can relate. I'd rather that the Jews not delete my vaguely racist tweets just as much as the next goy, but you gotta look at this with a little perspective. Are you calling me a libertarian? Or is that to everybody else? On all fronts, the state-backed media continue to put out some of the most foul reprobate filth on the daily, a good portion of which is directed at children. You got kids barely out of the crib grappling with gender roles and teenagers watching vile, slut-pandering, MTV-endorsed trash. And that's just scratching the surface. Are you really going to cry about censorship as a damaging societal factor when much greater damage is being done with the shit that actually passes through the FCC's pause hole? Now all this shit has a tangible effect on how our society perceives acceptable moral standards and similar principles, as everyone no doubt understands. However, in the supposed libertarian utopia where free speech is absolute and the government limited, this problem doesn't suddenly cease to exist. You're just replacing the state with the free market as the source of deviancy. When you remove the corrupt influence of the state, the free market will still continue to follow the whims of a now aimless populace who have no real moral authority to grasp onto as a result of years of secularist dogma. Yeah, that always cracks me up about these right-wing libertarian types who are like, let the free market decide. What? It's just like the whole idea with nationalism and self-determination. Okay, you have self-determination. Are you making the right determinations? Retard. It's a roundabout way of saying that what is moral is determined by the majority, when we know that is absolutely not the case. Where did I leave off? At least the state has the chance of implementing some theocratic principles and reforming our decaying culture, because we certainly aren't capable of doing it on our own. Now, what I propose as a compromise when it comes down to it, I do believe that whatever you wish to release for public viewing should be allowed to exist in some form. What I do not believe is that the state should endorse or fund material that fails to meet our God-given moral benchmark, and as such should be actively opposed. If an independent network or broadcaster should choose to showcase some tacky pause-guzzling advocacy show or Zionic the Hedgehog reruns, it should not be endorsed or supported by the state. Ideally, anything not in accordance with the moral standard will no longer be at the centerpiece of cultural significance, since it will no longer go without authoritative scrutiny. In a way, refusing to carry or promote deviant filth isn't exactly censoring anything, so the libertarians should technically be in support of this endeavor. I doubt it, though. They'd stand against it on principle, which is amusing, considering that any talk of principles are nowhere to be found once the prospect of cummies rears its ugly head. I'm not usually one for politics, so it irks me that I have to use all this political babble when arguing this particular issue. Seems to be the only way the godless mind interprets anything. Honestly, if what I've played out still proves unsuccessful in tempering the public's craving for pause, then perhaps outright censorship would be our only recourse. A drastic measure to be sure, but not one without merit. Anyway, thanks for reading this pablum, CF. None of these dusty hoes got anything on you, man. God bless, and God bless you as well. Well, I have nothing to add to that other than, look, if you create a law against something, it creates a point of resistance. It creates a thing they can point to and saying, look, we're being oppressed. Which is why you need to say something like sexuality is not speech. And it's true, it's not. But you have to enforce that at the ground roots level. After all, God came to earth. He didn't manifest himself as a king. He rubbed elbows with the common people. He chose common people to spread his word. It's difficult to influence the culture from the top down if that top doesn't already agree with what's going down below. So, I get you. I understand your sentiment. I'm on board, but I'm really skeptical of its potential effectiveness. Well, let's see if I'd like to hear your opinion on this. The job I, German 18-year-old, always wanted to have was that of a high school teacher. However, I wouldn't have a chance to do that if I became active in politics at the same time. I wouldn't be happy staying silent just to have a secure job either. I'd feel guilty. As an alternative, I could study law, which is the springboard into politics here in Germany, and which would allow me to make a good amount of money regardless of my political standpoint, but that would make me a career politician, wouldn't it? And I certainly don't want to be that. What do you think? Thanks in advance. Well, you gotta make a decision. I mean, there's a lot of different kinds of teachers. I don't have anything against people who teach math or biology, or anything else with some practical application. It's the paid propagandists who call themselves humanities teachers that I have a problem with. So I don't know what to tell you. I can't say if it were me, because I find every aspect of the humanities, I think I would almost rather be tortured than sit and major in history or education. Almost. It is almost that unappealing to me. So I don't have any solid advice for you other than learn something useful. Just get a useful skill that will keep you viable in the job market for the foreseeable future. Because I don't care about what a teacher does. I don't care what that involves. I know a little bit about what it involves, and it's garbage. They make you jump through so many hoops because at least here in America, it's because it's such an easy job. It's such a bullshit job in most fields. Like I said, people who actually teach a subject that requires some rigor, I have respect for. I do. I have respect for people who teach the humanities who don't use their classroom as a soapbox. I'm influencing all these 15-year-olds. Go me. I'm doing really important things. It's pathetic. So, sorry about that. Next. LOL, dude, I'm red-pilled on kike on a stick religion, XD. Some posts on poll on the regular D/C threads that I found I think are really good. What pagan LARPers don't understand is that Christ was around during Pharisaic Judaism. Judaism, as it is an issue today, refers to rabbinic Judaism. Christ criticized the Pharisees, the Jews, and the Jews time and time again have been punished for their rejection of Christ. That's why Jews don't like Christianity, aside it being a source of strength for Europe, the lands which the Ashkenazis always seek to subvert. So what people don't understand about secular Jews who seek to subvert the Pale Goyim is that they're out of touch. They think that white people are still Christians, and they're not. After the destruction of the Second Temple during the First Jewish-Roman Wars, Jews transitioned into Rabbinic Judaism and led into the codification of the Talmud. Their hatred of Christ and Gentiles is very prominent in this book. This, along with their collective obsession with themselves, has turned them into the problem they are now. The New Testament and current Judaism are completely unrelated. These facts only make the phrase Judeo-Christian values that much more annoying. There's absolutely no reason to suck up to hand-wringing Christ deniers. Yeah, well, and that's what white people are hell-bent on becoming. They're like, hey, the happy merchant, and then it turns into, Jesus was a Jew. It's like, do you read Titus? Do you read Revelation? You read anything other than the first 5 books of the Bible? Like, even the first 5 books of the Bible. It's like there's really not a whole lot of talk of swindling the Goyim in any of it. So it's just really stupid. Hey there, CF. It's been quite some time since I posted on here, and I decided to come back to tell a short story. About a week ago, I was hanging out with an old acquaintance. She asked me if she could stay over at my place that night, and thought nothing of it since she showed absolutely no sexual interest, and every time we've talked before, it was always as friends. This is you hear that? People on their oh, look how cool I am. I ride a loud bike. This is what I get for leaving my window open. Okay, yeah, that already, the alarm is already sounding on that. Can I stay over your house? What does it say? While after we arrived, she kissed me, and even though it caught me by surprise, I went along with it. The opportunity was right there. She was laying on my bed, and there was nothing stopping me from going to the next step, but I didn't. I did not and do not like this girl. There's nothing wrong with her on the outside, but she's too much of a lost cause at this point. She has to label herself in order to be relevant, and even though it isn't LGBT related, it's still an unnecessary amount of labels. Geek, nerd, insert computer product here, fan, etc. Yeah, because she's desperate. She has nothing to make her feel relevant. She doesn't have a husband. She doesn't have a family. You know, everybody has a need to be special. Everybody has this need to mean something to somebody else. There's nothing wrong with it. Nothing wrong with it at all. But, and this is how she goes about it. And there's nobody in her life who loves her enough to say, that's not how you do it. Nobody has the guts to tell it to her. And she probably doesn't have the guts to listen to it and take it to heart. Ever since I started listening to your show, I started making sense of everything my parents taught me. Well, before I could have just had a one-night stand with this girl, I now understand that in the end I would have felt empty inside afterwards because I have no feelings for this girl. Thanks again for putting some people back on the right path. I now appreciate more everything everyone in my life has done for me and can only hope to one day become a man worth looking up to, just like how I now look up to my father. Thank you, CF. Stay safe, and God bless. Well, credit to you for controlling yourself in that situation. Because 999 out of 1,000 guys wouldn't have. So I already shared my thoughts. I gave my insight. And God bless you as well. Hey, CF, I just wanted to encourage you, not discourage, encourage you, because I know after this last week, it seems like the white man is bent on suicide. Nobody seems to listen to you anymore, and I know the anger, bitterness, and that fuel in white race wants to pause itself to death. Don't lose heart, man. Your work is not going to waste, as you are doing it for God, and God will bless those who honor him. You are in my prayers and prayers of several others. I know that one day the white race will return to God and become pure. God will restore the glory and godliness of the white race and remove every bit of pause that tries to kill it. That day will come. Remember who you are, white brother. The Lord is great. He is our Father and will hear our cries. Well, I think it's too early to say that, but I appreciate your hopeful sentiment. And that's all I have to say. Okay, next. If I adjust my chair. Hello, CF. I was surprised that you said the words Last True Rebellion because you reminded me of Death to the World, which is a zine made by former members of the punk subculture who embraced Orthodox Christianity. I particularly like the examination of G.G. Allen's death compared with the death of a particularly exemplary man. The thing I noticed is that these two people, as the author said, were not at all posers, but we can sum up how they lived with how they died. Anyway, I got to thinking about the entire topic of the soul existing or not existing in some people, and I have to ask some questions. Do people lose their souls, or does it only seem like they lose their souls? In the case of the former, when they die an earthly death, what will God judge and cast into fire? If it's in the case of the latter, which I am convinced of, I'd posit that the seeming loss of soul is accompanied by a darkening of the intellect, warping of a human being, which was made in God's image, into base, amoral, pleasure-seeking animals. But then, because a human being has free will, because if there's no free will in a human being, what's the point of evangelization? It has to be the case that they chose to debase themselves and commit spiritual suicide. Though the soul is immortal, because it is spirit and given by God, and spirit cannot be divided, and so cannot cease, therefore it is only destined to eternity in either heaven or hell, based on God's judgment. Do you believe that a person's soul's existence is dependent on the actions they do while alive? You are against abortion, and so am I, but I am also curious if you believe that a person receives their soul at conception. The Bible says nothing about this, that is why early Christians had varying opinions about it. The general understanding now, however, is that there has to be a consistency in the ethics of it. Does a child stop being human just because its head is still inside the birth canal? I mean, the clump of cells not murder defense makes it seem easier to chop off people's body parts and eat it because piece of meat, not cannibalism, would run by the same logic. Well, look, one of my favorite verses in the Bible, which talks about God giving people over to a reprobate mind, which would suggest that it's what you do on earth that causes him to do that. Your passions and the actions informed by your passions are what causes God to do that. And these actions, which man engages in, they're not done by babies. They're not done by unborn children. Let me put it to you like this. Humans are different because they have a soul. And something I said earlier, when you do something that causes you emotional, psychological, spiritual pain, you know that you're doing something dysfunctional, but people are too prideful to admit that they're doing something wrong. They're like, oh, but I want to keep doing this even though it hurts. So they become numb to the pain they inflict upon themselves. That pain that's coming from that pain, which is their soul telling them, stop. But they keep ignoring it. They keep ignoring it. They keep ignoring it. And eventually they become numb to the pain they inflict upon themselves. At this point, they might have a soul, but they might as well not have one because it's no longer telling them anything. And that's what we're talking about when we're talking about soulless people. Not that they don't have one, but that effectively it's not there. It has no function anymore. It's there, but they've rendered it useless. That's what I'm talking about. And children are not capable of that kind of self-destruction. Small children, we'll say prepubescent, even though leading up to that, they can do some pretty destructive things. You stated before you used to be a social libertarian. I apologize if this has been asked before. When you turned into a religious man of God that you are today, how many friends did you lose along the way, and were those friends sodomites, and which type? Again, I apologize for repeating a question that was most likely already asked, but you mentioned in a couple episodes. You used to be a social libertarian and you lost friends due to them being sodomites, but you never really went into detail on this. Thank you for reading, and God bless. Well, I've said before that everything I believe, I used to believe in the opposite, but I was thankful enough to not put those beliefs into practical application. You know, I was a good little white boy who's always putting everything into abstract terms like, oh, well, it doesn't affect you. We shouldn't have any laws against it. But then I figured something out. I realized something. I don't have these kinds of people in my life. I used to talk to these kinds of people online who were more sympathetic to these ridiculous ways of life. But they were very rarely in my physical presence, and I had none of them as actual real-life meat space friends. So eventually I took stock. I thought, if I don't want these people in my life, if I don't have these people in my life, why should I defend them politically? There's no reason to. But everything has to be an abstract in the depraved 105 IQ mind. So I disabused myself of that. I decided to put my IQ points towards something more productive, something more healthy. The more I think about it, the more I think about the things that people say, the more I realize that they have no mind of their own. It's always in relation to something else. In the case of the white psyche, it's always politics. So, there you go. There's your story. What happened to the Chans? I was just on 8fit and saw some Brazilian fag bragging about his cross-dressing boyfriend and only receiving praise for it. It seems like even places that attract and are notorious for their far-right demographics are becoming increasingly paused. Well, that's because men are becoming increasingly paused, regardless of their political rhetoric. And that breastfeeding story, I think that woman's boyfriend was a bodybuilder too. Bodybuilders are some of the most dysfunctional people on the planet. And because of that, it's no coincidence that most of them are also sodomites, depraved sodomites. What's your opinion on missionaries? I ask because I'm a missionary kid. That's just the term used, not that I'm young. In West Africa, in my experience, missionaries are probably the greatest people I have ever known. But I was just curious about your opinion on the practice. I think it's great. And I think it's really cool. I think that missionaries are very brave people. And it's a bravery that I wish I had to apply to something. So I have a lot of respect for people who do go out into the world and get things done. And get things done by rubbing elbow with average, everyday people. Just as Christ did. I'll be back in Burgerland by the time your next episode is out, and one of my friends commissioned a Pepe carving for me. A PP carving. Which I thought was very thoughtful. I'm going to start calling him PP. Caucasian females engage in sexual intercourse with canines. Hey, see, I'm just your usual autiste from New Zealand again. First, I created a Reddit account just to send you questions, and now I've made a Twitter one to see what you do in your hours of authentic ethnicity. Real ethnic individual hours. Who is awake? Hold on, my headphones are twisted. And my door is slightly ajar. 1 second. As they say, stop making me socialize outside my comfy bubble wrap of pee-pees, dude. Anyway, I just wanted to share a neat article I found that focuses on Christianity and masculinity within it. I know I don't really have a huge understanding of the faith considering my recent conversion to it, but it has a lot of interesting details on gender and Christianity and some of the reasons why many people, especially esoteric Trumpists, would see it as a weak feminine cuck religion. It doesn't even mean anything anymore. Quit using the word. You abused it as quickly as you found it. Basically focuses on how the feminization of Western civilization has led to the rapid decline of men in church and a gender gap with women, and talks about the different ways men and women view and worship God. And that men view God as a powerful authority figure who they admire and respect, thus giving themselves as faithful servants too, while women view him as a loving, emotional friend, almost lover, whom they pour their emotions onto. Very similar to what you said last episode of how women see the good in everything while men are more cynical and practical. I think it's a vital read as it shows us the different insights to how the genders interact with the faith, as well as the side effects that the modern churches are experiencing today. Here's a link for yourself to read if you feel like checking it out. And for those of you listening to the website, I'm not going to read the article because you did a good job at summing it up. Because I'm just we're already 2 hours in, so I just want to get to everybody and so I have a sense of completion here. Okay, the article is The Feminization of Christianity, artofmanliness.com, The Feminization of Christianity. The website also isn't too bad and can be helpful for those wanting to learn more about masculinity and what it is to be a man. No pause as far as I know, they strictly keep the website to its intended topic. Oh, and pickup artists, idols, and single moms just got beat the fuck out by, or blown the fuck out. Yeah, that's it. Blown the fuck out by Sam Gorilla Genitalia Hyde this week. What was your favorite skit this episode? Anyway, keep it up. Keep up the good work, you blessed anti-white Christ cuck, Christ Jew cuckaluck. P.S. Big Rig Nig, your MDE streams suck and you're a shill. Thank you, that is all. I was actually able to see the episode, wait, no, I shouldn't admit this detail because I don't want to bust anybody out. But yeah, I did see the episode. And it was good. The pickup artist thing was ridiculous. He's dragging this disabled guy around by his legs. Oh man, it was a good one. You have a good reply to your comment here. If you take a look at the comments under 10 women Christian men should not marry, you can see hundreds of examples of what you're talking about. These Christian women refer to God as my God versus your God when arguing against biblical traditions held for over 2,000 years. Those beliefs came from a largely misogynistic time period, from people who wrote their scriptures based upon the sexist social norms and what ideals they were exposed to in their first education. So by saying that, they're saying that it's not the word of God. So they're showing their hands here. They're showing what cards they hold. They're not really Christians. They don't believe in the word of God. They don't take it seriously. They only like the parts that justify that seem to rationalize and justify the present social orthodoxy. And then, the God I know would disagree with this article. My God doesn't play or go by man's rules. He trumps over and nullifies man's selfish statistics, research rules, and foolish desires. Yet yet sexism, what is considered sexist, is entirely dependent on what men think of it at that time. Oh, man. Yeah. Repackaging feminism as Christian wisdom, twisted scripture, and relishing sin. Yeah. Awful. So, do you have any thoughts about the Catholic idea that God allots a certain number of sins he will forgive for each person past, which he will not permit repentance and salvation reference? No, I don't think it's like, there's so many sins. So, here's the problem. Because people are like, all sin is equal and this and that, really stupid things that people believe, they'll use that to just do horrible things just one time. And then they'll be like, look, I don't have my third strike. It is a horrible way of viewing God's judgment. That it's just a numeric thing, that it's an equation. It's how atheists and other people think religion works. So no, I don't like that idea at all. So yeah, very familiar with the work of Nobody TM. I believe I saw somewhere you posted a link to the video called Nobody TM Funnily enough, hosted on Adam Wallace's channel, who somebody brought up in the latest episode. His work at Nobody TM is very similar to yours. Nobody TM, I had an article on the website, nobodytm.com, saying that they enjoy my work. So, yeah, I've known about Nobody TM for a really long time. I really, really enjoy the work they do. It is fantastic. And I recommend everybody checks it out. Hello, CF, and God bless. My parents divorced when I was 5. My mother repeatedly did reprobate things, such as telling my dad she would do whatever it took to make sure he would never see me again when I was 2, and getting drunk, locking herself in their room and calling the cops, telling them he was going to kill her. Great. What finally caused my dad to divorce her was when she had one of her tantrums and ran away to Louisiana. We live in Texas. She called and said she was going to come get my sister, causing my dad to panic because he didn't know where she would take his daughter. Fast forward to me at 17, having learned all of these facts. I've always despised my mother. She never bought me anything or really did anything for me. And she always sided with my stepdad whenever he would do something obnoxious like making fun of me for being fat. I wasn't even 10 at the time. Or calling me a slob, and even when he molested my sister. That is... Yeah, I'm really sorry to hear that. He was never convicted because of shitty law enforcement in the county they live in. On top of that, she was generally a mean person to me. She even forgot my birthday last year. I resent my mother very much. However, my dad is also pretty bad. He feels zero shame whatsoever about putting me through this for so long when he divorced my mom. He isn't abusive or anything like that, and generally pretty nice, but the total lack of empathy about the fact that neither of my parents love me enough to make their marriage work so I could be fucking happy is appalling now that I realize this. I feel extremely betrayed at being raised so that I never realized the shit I was being put through. I'll bring up how shitty a divorce is every now and then, and he'll laugh it off like I'm trying to get him to buy me something. However, it should be noted that he is actually there for me for things, and he feeds, clothes, and like I said, is nice to me. Basically, my family was very much like the one in AFK 4, where the lady is crazy and deceptive and generally evil, but the guy just sort of lets it happen, though he seems a little more concerned about the kids than my dad. Yeah, a lot of people who criticize the father in that video, you have to realize that the system is rigged against people like that. And that he took those videos for his own protection so he wouldn't end up in jail. Because usually in cases like that where the woman is making stuff up, like, oh, he hit me, he did this to me, he did that to me, it's her word over his, which is why he documented what he did, which is why he had that video camera on him documenting those really painful videos. And there's more of them. If you look up Marriage in Plano, Texas on YouTube, you will be able to find the whole series of those. I really just wanted to vent to somebody I look up to, since my dad is my only real role model, even though he's done reprobate shit like dating again after he fucked his first marriage up. Something I fucking despise seeing him do, since my maternal stepfamily is fucking despicable. I guess if I need a question, should I forgive my parents for not loving me enough to stay together? You don't have to read this on CF, but feel free to. I welcome any input from other members. Thanks, and God bless. God bless you as well. I have to say, given the two idiots you come from, you have a good amount of awareness of how bad your parents are, how crappy your situation is. So, I think that's something good, and you're on the right track in that respect. Your parents are people who fit within the description I give of the living dead. People who the lights are on, but nobody's home. They walk and talk and they eat and they sleep. They do everything a normal human does, but there's nothing behind the eyes. They just do things to do them. And they don't know why. They don't know why they got married. They don't know what marriage is for. They don't know why they had kids. They don't know what the purpose of having kids is. You're dealing with people who were never given a proper guidance on life. Nobody ever told them what the purpose of these things they're doing, these very important things they're doing are. It was never explained to them the purpose of marriage. Having children, the purpose of that was never explained to them. They just like, oh, I had sex and a baby, now I have a baby. That's all it is to them. They don't understand how significant the marriage and having children is. They don't get it. A reply here that you received I would like to read. It says, hey bud, I had some pretty lame parents too. You can't control anything they do. It's always been out of your hands, and in a lot of respects, it still is because you are so young. That doesn't mean it's okay. I don't think your parents should have ever gotten together, let alone stay together. I do advise to forgive your mom and your dad, because at the end of the day, they're just damaged children that grew up, were raised by damaged children who grew up, and then made damaged children. You don't have to be that way, and you don't have to bear the burden of resentment. That's what you need to focus on. And to that, you cited something I said, forgive but don't forget. Now, what I mean by that is that you should not forget what they did. What you should do is leave behind the resentment from what they did. The only reason you need to remember what they did is so that you have that knowledge of whatever transgression they committed the last time, you avoid damage to yourself if they do it again. So I hope that clarifies some things, because resentment's not a good thing to hold on to, especially when it comes to matters of an interpersonal nature. So let those hard feelings go, because they're only hurting yourself. And learn from their mistakes. And don't be hurt by them again. Do you think abortion would be acceptable if the mother knew beforehand that her baby would be born with a serious birth defect? And then the response here was, people always try to bring up rape and birth defects as tough questions related to abortion, but the answer is simple. Two wrongs don't make a right. Rape and birth defects suck, but murder doesn't make it all better. In fact, one of the huge things that makes abortion palatable to people is dehumanization. Dehumanization has been used to justify murder since the dawn of time, and pro-abortionists use terms like fetus to make them seem less human. I'd venture as far to say that the birth defect argument is a part of that dehumanization process, right? Because a serious birth defect doesn't make you any less human. There are people who are born with birth defects who go on to live productive lives. It's not insurmountable. I'm not saying that they don't suck, but think about it. In all my experiences, I look at people who deal with special needs people, right? Who have a crippled sibling, who have crippled children, who have developmentally stunted children, mentally retarded children. They're never made worse for that experience. They're always incredibly kind and patient people. Now, I'm not saying that there aren't exceptions to that. I'm sure there are. I'm sure there are some horrible people who mistreat the less fortunate. And the rape argument is one that really irritates me because this assumes that the baby should be punished. Then the mother in her eternal solipsism thinks, oh, I'm gonna have a rape baby. It's not about you. It's about the kid. Is it the kid's fault that it's a rape baby? Don't punish the kid. And blessed are the women who don't view it that way, who don't view it as just a punishment for themselves. Hey CF, I'd really like to send you a special gift instead of buying the usual extras, but now since a lot of people are trying to dox you for revenge because you called those retards out, but it seems like there ain't no way without you getting into trouble. Is there any other way I can show some material gratitude? Thanks. Well, you can buy stuff through Amazon.com if you're in America. But if not, you can just keep buying stuff through the Bandcamp store. I mean, it might not seem like much to you, but I really do appreciate all of the patronage I receive on there. Honestly, I don't know what I did to make people so mad. You speak truth and people just, they go ballistic. Oh, whatever. I'll keep carrying on. When I was a boy, wait, what? Hold on. Oh, I think all European nations should open borders for all Muslim immigrants. Probably we'll see a massive influx of people immigrating to Russia for asylum just to see sick people either rejected or deported. Okay. When I was a boy, I wasn't allowed to watch Harry Potter because of the benign portrayals of witchcraft and wizardry. I ended up not caring for Harry Potter, but I wondered what shows or movies would you keep your kids from viewing. Well, Harry Potter, I think the problem with Harry Potter is, it has very little to do with witchcraft and wizardry. Harry Potter seems to encapsulate a lot of the entitlement of this generation.
I'm special. Why can't you realize this? Why is the rest of the world against my specialness?
So yeah, I'm not into Harry Potter either. What shows or movies would you keep your kids from viewing? Well, here's the problem. You don't want them to be completely shut in so that they don't have an immunity to television or film or any other sort of media, any other form of popular media. So I do think some exposure to things that they'll encounter in their everyday life would be beneficial. You just have to monitor it and give them a good moral upbringing at home so that when they see something that runs counter to that, they can point it out and say, that's wrong, I'm not going to consume what this is preaching. And with that, episode 103 is just about done. Again, White Girls Fuck Dogs bumper stickers available now at commonfilthradio.bandcamp.com/merch. If you have any Amazon.com purchases you want to make, do so using the affiliate link below. Let's listen to that song again to close out this episode. Once again, thank you for listening. Take care of yourselves. Be good to each other. Talk to you later.
I'm not gay, traps are straight. Leave my mansions, you Christ cock. I'll jack off to whatever I want. You just wait till we have artificial going to hell. I fight recording shit on Twitter like anime girls wearing MAGA hats while you sit at your job.